Okay, picture this. It's August 1947. For India, it's a moment of pure euphoria, freedom at long last. But at the exact same time, it was a moment of absolute, unprecedented tragedy. This is the story of that incredible paradox, how the birth of a nation happened right alongside one of the greatest human catastrophes in all of history.
And right at the heart of this whole story is one man, Sir Cyril Radcliffe. Now, he was a respected British lawyer, but he was chosen for a very specific reason. He knew absolutely nothing about India. Seriously. The British thought, hey, his ignorance makes him neutral, right? But what it really meant was the guy drawing the border between two brand new nations couldn't tell you the difference between Punjab and Bengal.
So, how in the world do you divide a massive subcontinent in just a few weeks? Well, the process was frantic, it was deeply flawed, and honestly, it was an almost surreal exercise that would go on to change the world forever.
Just look at this timeline. It tells you everything you need to know about the insane pressure Radcliffe was under. He shows up on July 8th and is given just over 5 weeks to draw a line through thousands of villages, rivers, and communities. He's working with old maps, census data that nobody trusted, all while this massive clock is ticking down to Independence Day. Get this, the final border wasn't even announced until 2 days after independence. Can you imagine?
And it wasn't just about territory, not even close. It was about everything. The British bureaucracy and its infinite wisdom insisted on splitting every single government asset. They argued over library books, typewriters, and in one truly bizarre case, a shipment of 60 ducks. The whole thing was just meticulous in its absurdity.
Of course, the toughest calls came down to two huge, culturally vital cities. Calcutta, with its Hindu majority, that was pretty straightforward. It went to India. But Lahore was a real headache. Hindus and Sikhs owned most of the businesses, but Muslims were the largest single community. In the end, Radcliffe gave it to Pakistan. His argument? The new nation just couldn't survive without a major city to its name.
And this line, drawn so quickly on a map by someone who wasn't even there, well, it was about to become a human catastrophe. The second the border was announced, it just unleashed this massive wave of fear and violence, kicking off the largest migration in human history.
Just try to wrap your head around that number. 20 million people. All of a sudden, Hindus and Sikhs on the Pakistani side and Muslims on the Indian side were foreigners in the only homes they'd ever known. They had to abandon everything and start this desperate journey to a country most of them had never even seen.
And that journey was just deadly. You had these caravans of refugees stretching for miles, and they were relentlessly attacked by mobs from the other community. The violence was just staggering. We're talking estimates of over 1 million people killed.
The horror of it all was maybe best symbolized by the trains. They were called ghost trains. They'd be packed with refugees, and they'd pull into stations like Amritsar or Lahore, not with the sound of hopeful families, but in this eerie, dead silence. And when the doors were opened, they were just filled with bodies. On the side of one of those trains, someone had chalked a chilling message. This train is our independence gift to Nehru and Patel.
But here's where the story takes a wild turn. Amidst all this carnage, something truly incredible was happening. While Punjab was literally on fire, another potential flashpoint, Calcutta, stayed astonishingly peaceful. And the reason why? Wasn't an army. It was one single man. Think about this stunning contrast. In Punjab, you have a 55,000-strong military force that is completely overwhelmed by the violence. It's total chaos. In Calcutta, a city just as ready to explode, there's peace. The difference wasn't guns or soldiers, it was Mahatma Gandhi.
Lord Mountbatten, India's last viceroy, he knew he didn't have any troops to spare for Bengal. He was desperate, so he went to Gandhi, who was completely heartbroken by the partition, and he basically pleaded with him to go to Calcutta. He told him, "You will be my one-man boundary force," because he knew Gandhi's presence alone could do what an entire army couldn't.
And when violence did eventually start to bubble up in the city, Gandhi pulled out his ultimate weapon. He began a fast unto death. He vowed he wouldn't eat a single thing until the city came to its senses. The effect was electric. The thought of being responsible for Gandhi's death literally shamed the city's leaders. In just 73 hours, gang leaders were coming to his bedside, confessing what they'd done, and laying down their weapons right at his feet. They called it the miracle of Calcutta.
So while that fire was being put out, another, even bigger challenge was looming. See, partition was just one half of the story. The other half was integration, this monumental task of somehow uniting a completely fractured subcontinent into a single country.
Because you have to remember, British India wasn't one single thing. It was this patchwork of territory the British ruled directly, and then these 565 princely states. With the British leaving, all these kings and maharajas were technically free to become their own independent countries. India's leaders were facing this terrifying prospect of a map that looked like Swiss cheese, just full of holes.
The job fell to two men, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and his top civil servant, VP Manan. And their strategy was a masterclass in diplomacy, a real carrot-and-stick approach. They basically guaranteed the princes their wealth and their titles in exchange for them handing over control of their states to India. And they cleverly used Lord Mountbatten, who was a cousin of the British king, to appeal to the Maharaja's sense of royal duty.
And don't think for a second this was all just quiet, polite diplomacy. Oh no, this was high-stakes drama. At one point, the young Maharaja of Jodhpur, right after he was persuaded to sign the accession paper, whipped out a miniature pistol and held it to Menon's head, shouting, "I refuse to accept your dictation." Mountbatten himself had to step in and disarm him. It just goes to show you how personal and intense these negotiations really were.
By August 15th, nearly all the states had joined India. But a few critical pieces of the puzzle were still missing, and they were about to set the stage for a conflict that continues to this very day. The most famous one, of course, is Kashmir. But the whole situation was really set up by another state, Junagadh.
You really have to look at these two states to understand the problem. They were perfect mirror images of each other. In Junagadh, you had a Muslim ruler in charge of a mostly Hindu population, and he decided to join Pakistan. In Kashmir, it was the opposite, a Hindu Maharaja ruling over a mostly Muslim population, and he was dreaming of being independent. You can see how this was an absolutely explosive situation.
So, while Kashmir's Maharaja was hesitating, Pakistan forced his hand. They sent in armed Pashtun tribesmen to seize the state. But then, a crucial mistake. The invaders, who had been promised loot, stopped in the town of Baramulla to plunder and pillage. And that delay, a delay born of greed, gave India just enough time. The desperate Maharaja signed the accession to India, and Indian troops were airlifted into Srinagar, securing the airport just in the nick of time.
The war that followed didn't really end with a clear winner. In 1949, the UN brokered a ceasefire, and the line where the two armies stood became the de facto border. Today, we know it as the line of control, a scar left over from 1947 that has never fully healed.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that central paradox of 1947. It wasn't one story, it was two stories happening at once. It was the absolute tragedy of partition, a violent tearing apart of a society. And at the exact same moment, it was the political miracle of integration, the stitching together of over 500 different pieces into one single, unified nation.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The events of that chaotic year, that line drawn by a man who had never even seen the land he was dividing, it didn't just create two countries. It kicked off a chain of events that continues to define the politics, the identity, and the future of South Asia to this very day.